I want to go to my guests. I am joined with the man himself, Mike Maloof. He is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service experience in the U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
I'm great, Jamal. Thanks so much. Feeling
Oh
better.
man, I always appreciate having you. I'm just to lead into this. Give me your take on the conversations between Putin and Trump. Apparently, they talked yesterday for 2.5 hours. Both sides say that the conversation was positive. Russia and Trump agreed on, and ostensibly Zelensky also agreed on a fig leaf ceasefire for 30 days on energy systems. Apparently, there were also agreements on the Black Sea. This was immediately violated by Ukraine, I guess, getting across the seriousness that they don't like this in these negotiations. But give me a take on this notion that the principals are talking, and this is after Witkoff went to Moscow, had a conversation with Putin, which was apparently also positive. What are your thoughts? What do you think this conversation is ultimately about? And the impact, by the
Well,
way, of the conversation.
I think Trump and Putin have a much larger geostrategic vision other than just Ukraine. They are looking to reestablish their own spheres of influence once again and become strategic partners in a variety of areas, critical areas, where they can cooperate. And they're talking in terms of economic, political, and principally economic opportunities in terms of what they can do. Now, some folks believe the notion is to try and wean Russia away from China, but number one, I doubt that will happen. But number two, Trump himself has basically downplayed that notion, suggesting that he wants to work with Xi Jinping as well. So you got strategic partners here. These are the pachyderms of the world, and they're talking to one another. And the likes of a cog like Ukraine is nothing, and it's just a step toward trying to achieve this greater geostrategic vision for one another. Now, I just read just before I came on where the White House has ordered the various U.S. agencies to reestablish their ties with their Russian counterparts, CIA, Pentagon, State Department. That's big. This is a reopening. I mean, those relationships have been virtually frozen during the entire Biden administration, and so there's this opening up now of trying to regain that relationship, and I think it's going to be beneficial to the world. We've seen no evidence that Russia has grandiose designs to conquer Europe. At this point, who wants it? You know, and yet they're talking belligerency. They're talking war, and you know we fought 2 world wars on their behalf, and yet these are based on ancient feuds. Enough. We've seen the pattern of behavior now for a century that suggests they're not going to change. And the more we get embroiled with them, the more we get involved with them. That's why I believe once this strategic relationship is reestablished, and there's a variety of areas where they can have agreements, such as in strategic weaponry, lowering the nuclear threshold, and lessen the world tensions. I think you're going to see NATO begin to splinter up into fragments of itself, of more regional defense alliances over time. I think that's where it's going to be heading. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but I think eventually that's what it's going to do. Now, if this was the last year of Trump's administration, I'd say, nah, that's not going to happen. But his term is just beginning. I mean, he's
Yeah.
got 4 years to make this all
Yeah.
happen.
It's been 2 months. It feels
Yeah.
like it's been longer. He's been hyperactive.
To the Democrats, it's been a total nightmare.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I figure the problem for the Democrats is that what Trump is doing is making them look so bad that their only defense is to fight back and to fight but they don't come back with alternative proposals, and that's why they're going to continue losing. Period. Now that's a separate issue, but
They have been
I've seen it in the bureaucracies when you as a civil servant did well and you did and your group exceeded the expectations and you got awards, it pissed off everybody else around you. So they want to lower you to their level so that you don't make them look bad, and that's what's happened. I mean, it's typical bureaucratic mindset.
Well, they are not looking great from the standpoint of the American public.
No,
CNN,
but look at the reaction to Musk and his achievement in retrieving those astronauts.
Yes,
and he's still being condemned. He's still. I mean, that's success. You see, that's success. You cannot reward success. You got to try to cut it down, and that's what we're seeing, the negativity that's being espoused by the Democrats at this point. And I think it's a crying shame. We should be applauding it.
Yeah, those astronauts have been in there for months, and
but it was an achievement. It was apparently Musk had offered it to the Biden administration. It was turned down. The astronaut's brother yesterday said, well, there was always a standby capsule. No, there wasn't. If there was, why didn't they would have taken it?
Yeah, they would have used it. This is Zelensky repudiating everything that Donald Trump apparently is agreeing with Russia on. But fundamentally, it seems that Trump and Putin agree on the main contours of the deal. Like they agree on Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO. Territorial integrity, meaning Ukraine is going to have to give up territory, which most likely means Russia's going to keep the territory because Rubio keeps saying, look, there are realities that are on the ground that we're going to have to deal with. And those realities being Russia's put those territories into their constitution and don't plan on giving them up. Now, there may be also something I think we should hit on. What's fascinating to me is Trump put out a 30-day ceasefire agreement that he knew was going to get shot down. Russia wasn't going to stop. Everybody understood Russia was not going to stop. However, what started as a 30-day ceasefire offer has now turned into a track towards peace. So what started off as, okay, what about this 30-day ceasefire? It's, okay, well, we're not going to accept that. We're not going to stop fighting. We're going to keep moving. Those soldiers in Kursk will remain, basically, they're going to be destroyed or they're going to surrender. However, we will now engage in negotiations with the idea that there's been no agreement to stop anything on the battlefield. So what started off as a 30-day ceasefire turned into a token agreement with a diplomatic track while they still continue on the battlefield. That is not exactly what initially was offered, but that is what it ended up being. Give me your take on that. I mean, how do you see it? Or do you think I'm being too...
I have a slightly different take.
Please.
I think Putin agreed in principle to a 30-day ceasefire. You've got, they're in the announcement yesterday, particularly from the Kremlin, the two sides were going to immediately get together in the Middle East to implement. Okay, someone's got to say, okay, at such and such a time, we're going to initiate this ceasefire, boom. And that'd be between, that assumes that the United States has some say over Ukraine and their action. So far, they're not telegraphing that. They're not suggesting that they're going to go along with it, even though they pay lip service to the concept. But when you listen to the new Ukrainian foreign minister, it's almost as though you're talking to a different entity altogether. So it sounds almost like the Ukrainian government is not unified in its in what it wants to say.
Yes.
or you have a lot of rogues who are in government. The other thing too is that
By the way, including Zelensky.
it depends upon what mood he's in.
Yep.
You see, the other problem is potential is that even though he might agree to a ceasefire, the Azov group and all these other groups that have so much invested in war may recoil and go rogue. And I think that is a very likely possibility. And I think that Trump realizes that. I think and certainly Putin does. They're going to go ahead with their proposals, their agreements. If Zelensky decides to do his own, then I think Trump is basically going to suggest or say, without saying it, Russia, do your thing. And if the Europeans want to join in with Zelensky, it's on them. The U.S. will no longer be involved. I think that's where it's heading. I don't have a crystal ball, but certainly I think that what other options are there? The Europeans have openly expressed opposition to wanting to wage peace. They're talking about gaining more, acquiring more funds to carry on the conflict. They are hell bent on war with Russia, and that goes back centuries.
Yeah,
especially the UK. I mean, it's unbelievable. They have never gotten over the Crimean War and all, and the original British-Russian war, and times before that, back into the 18th and 18th and 17th centuries.
Yep.
When does it
They're
end?
doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing.
All over again, just different century.
When I was studying Napoleonic Wars, I was shocked at how it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
You would get these countries, they would get it powerful, they would try to take over another country, and then they would lose a certain amount of power, and somebody would take over them, and they just go back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, dude, you've been doing this for centuries.
That's the beauty of history. You begin to see a pattern of behavior, and you know that what has been tried in the past didn't work. Yeah. Why don't we try something else? But they're not doing that. They're continuing on with their lemon approach and are going over the cliff once again. And they expect us to retrieve them. Once again, they were saying, well, we're gonna put in these troops, but we got to have strong U.S. backing. Oh no, we're not going that route anymore. That's nonsense. For what?
Well, that's them trying to destroy the peace process.
Of course.
I would say this is the reason why they're being babysit by Kellogg in that part of the peace process. I
remind people the UK is no bigger than the state of Indiana. Get over it. You're no longer an empire.
Yep. Well, they seem to think that they are.
Oh, yeah.
And Zelensky, listen to what he says here. I think this one is in English. The other one was in English. I hope this one is.
First of all, any negotiations, it's a very it's a chance to finish the war. So far, the Russians are not showing that they're ready to finish the war. With regard to the Crimean territory, that would be one of the sensitive and complex issues at the future. The first step is one thing. Ceasefire, of course, we need to cross some grounds to get there in order to quiet sky and quiet seas. So they are the correct steps if we want to end the war with a just peace. And then we'll be moving to other questions.
He seems to be under a mistaken idea that the loser of a conflict gets to dictate what happens after they lose. This notion that, we're going to have quiet skies and then talk about other items, he's out of his mind. Russia is going to keep moving and putting more and more pressure on the Ukrainian military up until the point where that military collapses if they don't come to a deal before that. Trump knows that, which is the reason why Trump is like, you need a deal now, because at some point your military will buckle. I mean, like, this is nonsense. Russia is not going to stop when they have the military edge and advantage on all sectors of the battlefield. And at this point, he's like, yeah, Crimea is complicated. No, it's not. It's in Russian hands. It's going to stay in Russian hands. It's considered Russian territory. It's going to remain that way.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing to me that Trump and Putin can talk about this stuff, come to some kind of general idea, and then Zelensky comes out and just blows it to hell. Trump is going to need his own man in Ukraine in order to make this stick, right? Meaning, is he going to be enough to stop this deal from coming through, whatever deal they come up with?
If you listen to Zelensky, it's almost as though he realizes his butt is on the line, and he's got to really worry about internal opposition. And he talks in generalities and platitudes. And if you read the body language and you read between the lines of what he's saying, he acknowledges that calm seas and air is important, because that's one of the proposals on the table for as part of the terms of the ceasefire. Putin has already at least partially agreed not to hit energy infrastructure, and he ordered that within minutes following the conversation with Donald Trump, and Witkoff confirmed that.
Mm-hmm.
So Putin has already displayed some sense of giving in, and that's an important thing to preserve the energy infrastructure of Ukraine and not destroy it completely, even though they're fully capable. They're fully capable of destroying the whole thing and turning the place into back to the Stone Age if they want to. But that's not what he's proposing. In fact, he's proposing just the opposite. And yet the Ukrainians, and especially Zelensky, I think due to internal pressures, is reluctant to acknowledge that for fear of what could happen to him personally. Yes. I think he needs to really call for elections and step down and get the hell out.
That's the other thing, right? Politically, could Zelensky even sign on the dotted line? Like, is there a man in a trench coat with a weapon waiting for Zelensky to sign that dotted line where it's like, dude, do it, and it's your life?
Well, that's why you're hearing no. The answer is no. I mean, short answer is no. He there's already too much baggage with Zelensky, and he has too many. And Azov has already threatened him. In the past, they've already threatened him. You back off from hitting the Russians. You're not, your life's in jeopardy, and they've made that clear to him. I think he needs to. But both Putin and Trump have called for early elections in Ukraine so they can reestablish legitimacy in that country. And Putin has also made it clear he doesn't want all of Ukraine. He says he wants Ukraine to exist. Okay, well, Western Ukraine will have something to deal with, and that is the pickings by Poland and Lithuania, historical desires to regain territories that they once had. For example, the Galicia area of Western Ukraine. Poland once had that. That was all part of Poland at one time, and they got Polish-speaking people in that region. They're going to want to have their pickings. That's why you see Poland so out in front on the eastern front of NATO, trying to wage this conflict to protect Ukraine, because they have vested interests, and they see the instrument of NATO being their ability to gain what they want politically.
But I mean, do you really see two things? One, do you really see Europe invading Ukraine in that way? And two, would the Russians even accept that? I mean, from their point of view, they are even pointing out that UK troops or French troops in Ukraine is a no-go. It's like, this is a non-starter. NATO is not going into Ukraine. From their point of view, how would that be different than NATO going into Ukraine?
Well, Putin has made it very clear he doesn't want them in there, period. You don't need them. You really don't need them. This is their way of trying to assert. You see, the Europeans have a real problem. They have an identity problem. They feel insignificant in the big powers talk, because they're not part of the agenda. They're not part of the group.
Right.
They're left behind in the dust, and they can't stand it. They're looking for relevancy, and this is what is really coming through to me, at least, that you got Macron, who himself politically is in deep trouble. So what do you do when you have domestic internal problems? You look outward to create a crisis to try and unify your country. And that's basically what he's doing. He's talking about now putting nuclear weapons on the border with Germany, maybe becoming the new nuclear umbrella for Europe. You can see where they're pulling away from NATO themselves and looking more toward an independent European defense alliance, and that is going to bring up competition once again, old 19th and 18th century competition between the French and the British all over again. I can see it happening. I mean, this goes on and on and on. Napoleon, where are you? Let's dust off the war plans. You know, I mean, here we go again.
Do you really see Europe doing that without America? I mean, like,
they
as
can't
somebody
do
told me, desperate people do desperate things.
Oh yeah, well, they're going to go through a semblance of it. Yeah, they recognize that the United States is peeling away. The old post World War II agenda
Order.
is archaic. It's over. We have moved on. But to move on, what do you if they had reestablished the defense alliance as a true defense alliance, but not against any country in particular, but to defend yourselves against any internal type of thing. But what happened was that you had the EU and all of these guys wanting to become a supranational group to take over the sovereignty of individual countries, and those countries are recoiling. So they've done it to themselves. It's all about the aggrandizement of power, and Brussels is the new capital of Europe, and never mind the capitals of like Paris or London. They're subservient now to Brussels of all places.
Mm-hmm.
The little statue kid peeing in the fountain, you know, and that's their claim to fame. So besides having NATO headquarters there.
They have good chocolate.
Yeah, they have good chocolate.
That's the best I can say. They have good chocolate.
I like Dutch chocolate better than I do Belgian chocolate.
Yeah, Belgian chocolates. Fair enough. And I guess the last question: do you think they're going to be able to gum up the works in a peace process? I mean, Taylor, do you think they're going to be able to gum up the works in a peace process? I mean, the very act of threatening that kills negotiations if it's not getting a full repudiation from Trump. And up to this point, Trump hasn't necessarily said, he has said, you're not going to get a backstop from us. But I haven't heard him stress this idea of you are on your own if you do this. We will leave you to your devices. You will be fighting the Russians on your own if you do this, which I think on some level is required. I think they really believe that Donald Trump, if they went in, and they will get destroyed by the Russians, because you can't allow a nose in a camel's tent. Right, like the moment that you put those troops in, does nothing, then you've allowed to put in more troops in that sense. If they believe, and this is the part where desperate men do desperate things, they have gotten themselves so wrapped up into this idea of a war that even when the U.S. is pulling out, they're like, we need a coalition of the willing to go in. Italy has said no, hell no, and Maloney is like, we're not doing this. We're not.
Well, there goes NATO unity.
Exactly. Germany at one point said no, but we need to see what the new chancellor has to say. They fractured. It's not this coalition of NATO in the way that you would think that this is breaking down. You're right. They fractured into these kind of coalitions of the willings to do this.
Yeah.
I guess my thing is, if they do, I guess two things. One, do you think they're going to do this? Or do you think they will even be willing to do this without the backstop from Trump, under the belief that if they are attacked, that the U.S. will get involved? And two, are they correct in that assessment that the U.S. would get involved if those European troops get slaughtered, which they will, by the way?
Yeah, I just don't see the U.S. coming to the assistance. Trump has made that clear. and he will not say it out directly, but by his actions of moving ahead, of going over them, and pushing them to the side while he makes strategic arrangements with Russia directly on a bilateral basis, I think is a very significant signal to the Europeans that they are secondary or even tertiary. Russia doesn't even want to deal with it. They're not even interested in what the Europeans have to say in terms of a peace plan. So that just shows you how they have been relegated to insignificance. Europe, all of Europe. And why? Because they can't find their ass with both hands. And they've made that very clear. And you see them groping around now. And they cannot, they are broke, they're in recession, and yet they want to commit to war. For what? And against Russia? Why?
Yeah.
And you see, why don't they worry about looking to it internally, develop them and refurbish their own industries and develop and regain their quality of life that they had prior to the SMO in 2022? No, that's not their. And you got a country such as Russia, which before that time was giving them very cheap energy. Why not just reestablish that? Russia has no designs on taking Europe. There's no evidence of that. Now, if Lithuania and what have you who are members of NATO want to have internal battles, internal political conflicts, and they decide to want to get out of NATO, well, that's their internal decision. Of course, that will be looked upon as a gain for Russia, but so be it. I mean, the people have spoken. But yet you don't see Europe wanting to retain democracy. And they've never really been democratic as such. And not in the sense of what the U.S. envisions as what is democracy, freedom of speech and what have you. We see that. Their notion of democracy is different than ours. And I think that's what also brought about the Vance comments, the criticisms. And the Europeans were just beside themselves. But yet they backed Ukraine, and it's under martial law, and they are going after the religious types. They're going after it internally inside of Ukraine. They're rounding people up, kidnapping them to draft them into the military. I mean, they're so contrary to our principles of democracy that you have to question what they really mean by being a democratic country, and what holds what is the cohesion, the glue that holds us all together that has dried up like glue. It dried
Romania
up.
is a really good example. I mean,
Romania is a perfect example.
Yeah. One last question. I'm sorry, I lied. One more question. This Putin pointed out during his conversation with Donald Trump, look, we want a ceasefire. That is perfectly fine. We want to end the war. We need to attend to the main items that started the war in the first place, NATO expansion being one of the main ones. He pointed out this territorial integrity issue. Effectively, we're not giving back what we've taken, and these are Russian territories. But he also pointed out, if indeed we reached a point where we can have a ceasefire and we can end hostilities, there still needs to be a way to ensure that the mechanism of the ceasefire is in place. Basically, we're not having Minsk again. We're not doing it. We did that twice. We're not doing it again. You guys did not attend to the agreement, so we don't trust you. And so this question comes up: how would they even ensure that the tenets of the ceasefire are kept, if indeed they come to? Meaning, I think for the Russians, if they see, okay, the ceasefire is going to lead to a long-term resolution because we've accomplished our military objectives and we are getting what we want, how do they ensure that this is not another Minsk 3? And I don't have an answer for that.
This is a little complicated, but here goes. I think Trump recognizes that he has no control over Zelensky, and Zelensky will do what he wants to do. Look, just at the time they were having a phone call, Zelensky attacked Belgorod. in Russia while the conversation was ongoing. What Trump is trying to achieve is a strategic agreement between the United States and Russia. And any peace deal with Ukraine is incidental. And if after he's established that relationship and he can get at least a ceasefire going, it'll be mission accomplished for Trump. And if the Europeans then and the Ukrainians want to go at it again and create their own mischief, it's going to be without the United States. And I think that is what Trump is. I think that's where it's heading, without saying as much. But I think that's inevitably where it's going to go. And I think the image is there. We're seeing it. They've agreed on almost everything they want to do between Trump and Putin in terms of a settlement between the United States and Russia, and reestablishing relationships and what have you, and entering into more bilateral disarmament talks. Again, this is absent any settlement with Ukraine. Ukraine is incidental. Now, if he can at least get the ceasefire, but then Zelensky and his hordes decide to go contrary to that and initiate and go contrary to the ceasefire arrangement, it's on them. Mm-hmm. And if the Europeans want to join in, it's up to them. But the United States will not back it. And I think that's where it's going to go.
Are you optimistic about the peace process, or you don't buy it?
Well, you don't know unless you try. And up until now, nothing else has worked. So at least you try, and hoping that you get something. But if these guys are so locked in on their approach of wanting to have war, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy for them. If you're going to be doing what you need to do to go back and wage conflict, you inevitably will have that conflict. And that's what I'm seeing happening here at the hands of the Europeans. And the Brits just can't seem to help themselves. I mean, they're suicidal. It's just suicidal. Yeah. And they've come up with no other alternative. They had 4 years to work out a peace agreement, but chose to go to war instead. They have no alternatives, and they still haven't come up with one, even though they're very critical of what Trump and Putin are trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. Yet they have no viable alternative in its place. So they need to just shut up and sit down.
Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years federal service experience in the U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, thank you, my man. I really appreciate these conversations. Thank you
very much, Jamal. Bye-bye.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. Yeah. And we'll see what